They saved one of us, so humanity returned for them all. 1 week after the battle, Tae Sung walked through the streets of the Velnari capital city. The city was built into living trees, organic structures that glowed with soft bioluminescence. It should have been beautiful, but the scars of war were everywhere. Buildings damaged by Kravik's weapons, empty spaces where families had been torn apart, the weight of trauma that hung over everything. But the Velnari were free. That's what mattered. Tae Sung had been searching for Velinar since they landed. He finally found the old healer in a refugee center, helping traumatized Velnari cope with their ordeal. When Velinar saw Tae Sung, the healer's bioluminescence exploded with joy. They embraced. This tall human commander and the small alien healer, two beings from different worlds who had formed an unlikely bond. "I never expected this," Velinar said, his voice thick with emotion. "When we saved you, we thought we were simply doing what was right. We never imagined you would risk everything to save us." "You gave me back my life," Tae Sung said quietly. "How could we do anything less?" Around them, human and alien personnel worked alongside Velnari, distributing supplies, repairing buildings, providing medical care. Captain Hyunwoo had set up a training center, teaching young Velnari the basics of self-defense. Not to turn them into warriors, but to give them the tools to protect themselves. Prin found them later, practically bouncing with excitement despite everything that had happened. "Commander Tae Sung, you have to see what we're planning." Come. The young navigator led them to a clearing on the edge of the city. Thousands of Velnari were gathered there working on something. As Tae Sung got closer, he realized they were planting trees. Special trees with bioluminescent bark that would grow and glow for centuries. "We are planting 2,847 trees," Velinar explained softly, "one for each human who died saving us. It is our tradition. These trees will be tended by our people forever, a living reminder of those who gave everything for strangers." Tae Sung felt his throat tighten. He watched as Velnari carefully planted each seedling, their patterns glowing with reverence and sorrow. These gentle beings who had never understood violence were now intimately familiar with its cost. "They should not have had to die for us," Prin said quietly. "We are not worth so much sacrifice." "Don't say that," Tae Sung replied firmly. "Every life is worth fighting for. That's what your people taught me when you saved my life." News of the battle had spread throughout the galaxy like wildfire. The Galactic Council was in complete chaos. Several major species had formally condemned humanity's actions, calling them reckless and aggressive. Ambassador Dae-hyun had sent multiple urgent messages demanding Tae Sung's immediate return to explain his actions. But other voices were also being heard. 8 minor species had already petitioned to form alliances with Earth. Dozens more were sending quiet diplomatic inquiries. On countless worlds, populations that had been ignored or exploited for generations looked at what humanity had done and felt something they hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Admiral Ji-won arrived on the Velnari homeworld 3 days after the battle. She had been recalled to Earth to face an official inquiry about the mission. The politicians were furious about the losses, about the diplomatic consequences, about the risk she had taken. Tae Sung met her at the landing pad. She looked tired but unbowed. "How bad is it?" he asked. "Bad," Ji-won admitted. "We lost 12 ships and nearly 3,000 people. Earth's defensive fleet is dangerously thin. The Council is threatening sanctions. The Kravik's Dominion has filed formal protests and is making noise about retaliation." She paused, looking out at the city where Velnari and humans worked side by side. "But we saved an entire species from extinction. We proved that the strong don't always win, that compassion isn't weakness. And we inspired others to stand up for themselves. Was it worth it?" Tae Sung asked. Ji-won was quiet for a long moment. "Ask me that question in 10 years. If the Kraviks don't attack Earth in revenge, if the species we inspired actually make the galaxy better, if this moment changes anything at all, then yes, it was worth it." That evening, there was a ceremony in the central plaza. Thousands of Velnari gathered, along with all the humans who had participated in the battle. Velinar stood before them, his bioluminescence bright enough to light up the darkening sky. "Today we honor those who fell," Velinar said, his voice carrying through translators to all who listened. "We honor humans we never met, who traveled across the stars to save beings they had no obligation to save. We honor the species who joined them, who risked everything to stand against cruelty." He gestured to the field of newly planted trees, already beginning to glow in the twilight. These trees will grow tall and strong. For centuries they will light our nights, and every Velnari who walks beneath them will remember that we were saved not by weapons or wealth or power, but by kindness repaid. Taesung stood with his surviving crew members, all of them wearing black bands in memory of those who hadn't made it home. Yuna was there, her flight suit still scorched from battle. Captain Hyunwoo stood at attention, his face stoic but his eyes wet. Bora looked small and young among the military personnel, but she had earned her place there with her brilliant engineering. After the ceremony, as people dispersed, Prin approached Taesung with something in his hands. It was a small box made of the same glowing wood as the memorial trees. Inside is soil from the field where we planted the trees, Prin explained, and a seed. When you return to Earth, plant it. Let it grow, so your people will always remember what you did for us. Taesung accepted the box with reverence. I'll make sure it's planted in a place of honor. The days that followed were busy with rebuilding efforts. Human engineers worked with Velnari to repair infrastructure. Medical personnel treated the injured and traumatized. Diplomats began the complicated work of establishing formal relations between Earth and the Velnari. Captain Hyunwoo surprised everyone by requesting a permanent transfer to Velnari space. Someone needs to help them build a defense force, he explained to Taesung. Not to make them warriors, but to give them the ability to protect themselves when we're not here. Taesung approved the transfer. Other humans also chose to stay, forming the core of an advisory team that would help the Velnari transition into a new era of their civilization. On the final day before the human fleet departed, Taesung walked one last time through the memorial grove. The young trees were already beginning to establish themselves, their bioluminescence creating patterns of light that danced across the ground. He stopped at one tree in particular. The marker at its base bore the name Hana, his communications officer who had died in the original pirate attack that led to all of this. If she hadn't died, if Taesung hadn't been injured, if the Velnari hadn't saved him, none of this would have happened. I hope you'd be proud of what we did, he said quietly to the tree. I hope it was worth it. The tree's bioluminescence pulsed gently as if in response. Velinar found him there. The old healer stood beside him in comfortable silence for a moment before speaking. You changed everything, you know. Not just for my people, but for the entire galaxy. How do you figure? Taesung asked. For centuries, the weak have been preyed upon by the strong. That was simply how things were. But you showed everyone that it doesn't have to be that way. You showed that someone, somewhere, might stand up for you. That kindness can be repaid with more than words. Velinar's patterns glowed with determination. Other species are watching, learning. The galaxy you return to will not be the same as the one you left. The human fleet departed the next morning. As Taesung's ship rose into orbit, he looked down at the Velnari homeworld. The memorial grove was visible from space, a patch of light in the landscape growing brighter as more trees were planted. On the bridge, his crew worked with quiet efficiency. They had been through hell together and they bore the scars, but they also carried something precious, the knowledge that they had done something truly good. All ships report ready for jump to FTL, the navigation officer reported. Taesung took one last look at the planet below. Set course for Earth. Take us home. As the fleet jumped to faster-than-light speed, the stars stretched into lines of light. They were going home, but they weren't the same people who had left. They had proven something important, something that would echo through the galaxy for years to come. They had proven that humanity keeps its promises. Far below, on the surface of the Velnari homeworld, Velinar and Prin watched the ships disappear into the stars. Around them, thousands of Velnari gathered to witness the departure of their saviors. Do you think we'll see them again? Prin asked. Velinar's bioluminescence pulsed with certainty. Yes, because we are friends now, and friends look after each other. In orbit around the planet, a small station remained, staffed by a mix of human and alien personnel. Captain Hyunwoo stood in the command center, looking out at his new home. He had work to do, training to provide, a species to help protect. It was a good way to honor those who hadn't made it back. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, the Kravik's dominion plotted and planned. They had been humiliated by a minor species, embarrassed in front of the entire galaxy. They would not forget. They saved one of us, So humanity returned for them all. The human fleet dropped out of FTL at the edge of the Velnari home system. Taesung stood on the bridge of his flagship staring at the tactical display. What he saw made his blood run cold. The Kravix had turned Velnari space into a prison. 3 massive dreadnoughts orbited the largest colony world, surrounded by dozens of smaller warships. More ships were scattered throughout the system, herding Velnari civilians onto transport vessels. It was organized, efficient, and absolutely brutal. "Commander, we're being hailed," his communications officer said. "It's the Kravix fleet commander. Put it through." The view screen flickered and showed a Kravix officer. The aliens were reptilian, with gray-scaled skin and cold yellow eyes. This one wore the insignia of a high-ranking commander. When he spoke, his voice was full of contempt. "Human vessels, this is Commander Vaskrin of the Kravix Dominion. You are in violation of territorial sovereignty. Leave immediately or be destroyed." Taesung stepped forward, making sure Vaskrin could see him clearly. "This is Commander Taesung of Earth. We're here for the Velnari. Release them, or we'll take them by force." Vaskrin's face twisted into what might have been a smile. "You dare threaten the Dominion with your pathetic fleet? We have 83 ships in this system. You have what, 40? This is not a battle, human. This is suicide." "Maybe," Taesung said calmly. "But we're here anyway. Last chance, Commander. Let them go." Vaskrin's laughter echoed through the bridge. "I will enjoy watching your ships burn." The connection cut off. "All ships, battle stations," Taesung ordered. "Execute Attack Plan Alpha. Let's show them what happens when you mess with someone humanity cares about." On the surface of the Velnari homeworld, Velinar watched the sky with thousands of other Velnari. The Kravix had herded them into detention centers, massive compounds surrounded by energy barriers. Tomorrow they would be loaded onto transport ships and scattered across the galaxy, sold to the highest bidders. Velinar's bioluminescence was dim with despair. In all his long life, he had never imagined his people would face such darkness. The Velnari had always believed in the goodness of life, in compassion and peace. But the galaxy had shown them how little those things mattered to species with power. Then someone shouted and pointed at the sky. Velinar looked up and saw lights, bright flashes against the darkness of space. A battle, ships were fighting above their world. Who would fight for us? Prin asked, standing beside Velinar. The young navigator's patterns flickered with confusion. "We have no allies, no one with the strength to challenge the Kravix." But Velinar felt something stir in his chest, a feeling he thought was lost. Hope, because he recognized those ship signatures on the distant displays that the Kravix guards were now watching with alarm. "Humans," Velinar whispered. The humans came. In space, the battle had begun. Vaskrin sent 20 ships to intercept the human fleet, clearly expecting an easy victory. What happened next shocked him. The human ships scattered, moving in patterns that Kravix targeting computers couldn't track. They were fast, impossibly fast, weaving and dodging with precision that shouldn't be possible. Before the Kravix ships could adjust their formation, the humans struck. Yuna led her fighter squadron in a dive toward a Kravix cruiser, approaching from below just as she'd practiced. The enemy's point defense system struggled to track targets moving at such angles. Her missiles struck true, punching through shields and detonating against the ship's reactor core. The cruiser went dark, drifting and powerless. "Target down," Yuna reported, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Moving to next objective. Bora's experimental EMP weapons proved devastating. 3 human frigates unleashed electromagnetic pulses that rippled through space, frying Kravix computer systems and leaving their ships blind and vulnerable. Normal weapons finished what the EMPs started. Within 10 minutes of first contact, the Kravix had lost 5 ships. They hadn't destroyed a single human vessel. Vaskrin stared at his tactical display in disbelief. These humans were supposed to be a minor species, barely a threat. But they fought like demons, using tactics he'd never encountered. And they weren't alone. 6 other alien species had joined them, small ships darting in and out, adding to the chaos. "All ships, full attack formation," Vaskrin ordered. "Crush them." The full might of the Kravix fleet turned on the human forces. 83 ships against 47 human vessels and 6 alien allies. On paper, it should have been a slaughter. But humans didn't fight by the rules. Captain Hyun-woo's marine transport shot toward a Kravix slave ship, one of the vessels loaded with captured Velnari. The ship's defenses were minimal because who would attack a transport? Hyunwoo, that's who. Breaching in 30 seconds, his pilot called out. Hang on, this is going to be rough. The transport slammed into the slave ship's hull with controlled violence. Cutting torches burned through metal. Then Hyunwoo and his Marines poured through the breach, weapons ready. The Kravix guards inside were unprepared for a boarding action. Marines moved through the corridors with brutal efficiency, stunning guards and freeing Velnari prisoners. Hyunwoo personally cut through the main detention area's locks, watching as 3,000 Velnari stumbled out, their bioluminescence flickering with shock and relief. You're safe now, Hyunwoo told them through a translator. We're taking you home. In the main battle, Tae-sung coordinated his fleet with the precision of a conductor leading an orchestra. When Kravix ships concentrated on one group, another would strike from an unexpected angle. When the enemy tried to split their forces, humans would focus overwhelming firepower on isolated targets. But the Kravix had numbers, and numbers mattered. Human ships started taking damage. A destroyer took a direct hit to its engines and went tumbling out of formation. A frigate's shields collapsed under sustained fire, and the crew had to evacuate before it exploded. We're losing ships, his tactical officer reported. 3 destroyers down, 2 frigates critically damaged. Tae-sung's jaw clenched. They were hurting the enemy, but this was becoming a battle of attrition. And in a battle of attrition, the side with more ships usually won. Then something unexpected happened. More ships dropped out of FTL. At first, Tae-sung thought Vaskrin had called for reinforcements. But these vessels weren't Kravix. They were from other species. Minor civilizations like the ones that had already joined Earth's fleet. 8 more ships, then 12, then 20. Commander, we're receiving messages from the new arrivals, his communications officer said, her voice filled with emotion. They say they heard what humanity was doing. They say they're here to help. Across the galaxy, the story of Earth's mission had spread. Species that the Council ignored. Civilizations that the powerful preyed upon. They had all heard that someone finally stood up, that someone said enough. And they came, bringing their small ships and their brave crews to stand together. The tide turned. Now it was the Kravix who were outnumbered. Vaskrin's tactical display showed ships on all sides. Human and alien vessels working together with surprising coordination. His formations were falling apart, his ships taking damage faster than they could respond. Yuna saw her opportunity. One of the Kravix dreadnoughts had moved away from the others, trying to target a cluster of human ships. Its escort vessels were damaged or destroyed. It was alone. All fighters on me, she called out. We're taking down that dreadnought. Her squadron dove toward the massive ship, dodging its point defense fire. They'd practiced this attack run 100 times. Missiles streaked through space, targeting the specific weak points in the dreadnought's armor that Bora had identified. One of Yuna's wingmates took a hit and spiraled away, the pilot ejecting at the last second. But the others pressed on. Their missiles struck home, punching through armor and detonating inside the dreadnought's massive reactor core. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the dreadnought tore itself apart in a bloom of fire that could be seen from the planet's surface. On the ground, Velinar and the other Velnari watched the massive explosion. The Kravix guards were panicking now, receiving reports of their fleet falling apart. The detention center's energy barriers flickered and died as power was redirected to more critical systems. We're free, Prin said, his bioluminescence pulsing with joy. The humans freed us. Vaskrin watched 2 more of his dreadnoughts take critical damage. His fleet was shattered, his mission a failure. Pride demanded he fight to the death, but survival instinct was stronger. All ships retreat, he ordered, his voice bitter. Jump to emergency coordinates. The remaining Kravix vessels broke formation and fled, jumping to FTL in flashes of light. They left behind debris, damaged ships, and thousands of freed Velnari. Tae-sung watched them go, breathing hard. His ship had taken damage and several decks were venting atmosphere. They'd lost 12 ships and nearly 3,000 personnel. But they'd won. Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the planet, his communications officer said. It's the Velnari. The view screen showed Velinar standing among thousands of his people. The old healer's bioluminescence was bright with emotion. Commander Tae-sung, Velinar said, his voice shaking. You came back. You actually came back for us. Tae-sung felt his own eyes burning. I told you. Humanity remembers our debts. All of them. They saved one of us, so humanity returned for them all. The military shipyards orbiting Earth hummed with frantic activity. Tae-sung stood in the command center of the Fleet Operations Building, staring at holographic displays showing 47 ships being readied for combat. It was nearly a third of Earth's entire military fleet, and they had just 12 days to prepare. "This is insane," said Captain Hyun-woo, a Marine officer who had volunteered within minutes of the mission being announced. He was a broad-shouldered man with scars on his face from the contact wars, a veteran who had seen more combat than most. "We're taking on the Kravik's Dominion with 47 ships. They have hundreds. Then we'll need to be smarter than them." Tae-sung replied, studying tactical data on the Kravik's fleet positions in Velnari space. The enemy had concentrated most of their forces around the 3 largest Velnari colonies. They weren't expecting resistance. Bora, a young engineering prodigy who looked barely old enough to be out of university, joined them at the display. "I've been analyzing Kravik's ship designs," she said, pulling up technical schematics. "Their vessels are heavily armored but slow. Their shields are powerful, but they drain a lot of energy. If we can force them to split their attention between multiple targets, their power systems will struggle." Tae-sung nodded. "What about our ships? Can we make them faster?" "Already working on it," Bora said with a tired smile. She'd been awake for 36 hours straight. "I'm stripping non-essential weight from our frigates and upgrading their engines. We won't match their firepower, but we'll run circles around them." In the training facilities below the shipyards, thousands of personnel worked around the clock. Marines practiced boarding actions in zero-gravity simulators. Pilots ran combat scenarios against simulated Kravik's dreadnoughts. Medical teams prepared for mass casualty situations. Tae-sung visited the training center on the 3rd day. He found Yuna, a hotshot pilot with a reputation for aggressive flying, running her squadron through attack patterns. "Commander on deck," someone called, but Tae-sung waved them off. "As you were." He watched as Yuna's simulated fighter weaved through enemy fire, targeting specific points on a dreadnought's hull. She was good, maybe the best pilot Earth had. After the simulation ended, Yuna approached him, her flight suit soaked with sweat. "Commander, I've been thinking about the Kravik's heavy ships. Their point defense systems are concentrated on the forward and side arcs. If we approach from below at high speed, we might be able to slip through their firing solution long enough to hit their reactor cores." "Might?" Tae-sung asked. Yuna grinned. "Probably. Maybe 70% chance of success. And the other 30%? We die in a ball of fire. But hey, we're going up against impossible odds anyway. Might as well be creative about it." Tae-sung found himself smiling despite the gravity of the situation. This was why he loved serving with humans. They faced impossible challenges with humor and determination. "Run the simulation 50 more times. If you can get that success rate up to 80%, we'll use your approach." The volunteer applications kept flooding in. Over 15,000 people wanted to join the mission, 10 times more than they could accommodate. Tae-sung spent hours reviewing files, selecting crews based on skill, temperament, and experience. It was heartbreaking to turn away people who desperately wanted to help. On the 5th day, he received a message from a group of civilian engineers. They wanted to donate their prototype weapon system to the fleet, an electromagnetic pulse device that could disable enemy electronics without destroying the ship. It was untested, unstable, and possibly dangerous to the ships that fired it. "We can't guarantee it won't backfire and fry your own systems," the lead engineer admitted. "But against the Kravik's, it might give you an edge." Tae-sung authorized installation on 3 frigates. In a fight this desperate, they would need every advantage they could get. Admiral Ji-won visited the fleet on the 7th day. She walked through the ship corridors, talking to crew members, listening to their concerns, boosting morale. Tae-sung accompanied her to the hangars where fighters were being armed and prepped. "The Galactic Council has formally protested our mobilization," Ji-won said quietly as they watched mechanics work. 5 council species have threatened to sever diplomatic relations with Earth. Ambassador Daehyun is having a breakdown trying to do damage control. Any chance they'll back down? Tae-sung asked. Not a chance. We've committed. The whole galaxy is watching to see what happens. She turned to face him. Tae-sung, I need you to understand something. If this goes wrong, if we lose this fleet, Earth will be vulnerable. Our enemies could take advantage of our weakness. We might lose everything. I know, Tae-sung said. But if we don't do this, if we abandon the Velnari, we lose something more important. We lose who we are, G1 smiled sadly. My grandfather would have liked you. She handed him a data chip. These are your final orders. Rules of engagement, fallback positions, emergency protocols. Read them, then forget them, ma'am. Those orders are for politicians and diplomats. But you're going into battle, and in battle you need to trust your instincts. Save the Velnari, Taesung, whatever it takes. On the 10th day, something unexpected happened. 6 alien ships dropped out of FTL near Earth's orbit. Taesung immediately ordered defensive positions, thinking the Kravix had launched a preemptive strike. But these weren't Kravix vessels. They were from 6 different species, all of them minor civilizations that the Galactic Council ignored or overlooked. Their ships were small and outdated, but they came broadcasting a simple message. We stand with Earth, we stand for the Velnari. Taesung felt his throat tighten. These species had no obligation to help. They were risking Kravix retaliation. But they came anyway, inspired by Earth's decision to stand up for the defenseless. Tell them they're welcome to join our fleet, Taesung ordered, and tell them humanity thanks them. The final 2 days were a blur of last-minute preparations. Bora and her team worked miracles, upgrading ship systems and installing new weapons. Captain Hyunwoo drilled his Marines until they could execute boarding actions in their sleep. Yuna's fighter squadron practiced their attack runs until their success rate hit 82%. On the morning of departure, Taesung stood before the assembled crews in the main hangar. Thousands of faces looked back at him, human and alien alike. These were volunteers, every one of them, people who chose to risk their lives for beings they'd never met. I won't lie to you, Taesung said, his voice carrying through the hangar. This mission is dangerous. The Kravix have superior numbers and firepower. Many of us won't come home. He paused, looking at each section of the crowd. But we're not going because it's easy. We're going because the Velnari saved one of us when they had no reason to. They showed us kindness when they could have saved their resources. They asked for nothing in return. His voice grew stronger. The galaxy thinks compassion is weakness. They think that species like the Velnari deserve their fate because they chose peace over power. Well, today we proved them wrong. Today we show the galaxy that compassion isn't weakness, it's strength. And when you show humanity kindness, humanity remembers. The hangar erupted in cheers. Taesung felt the energy, the determination, the absolute conviction that what they were doing was right. As the crews boarded their ships, Taesung took one last look at Earth through the hangar's viewport. His home planet looked so peaceful from up here, so beautiful. In a few days, he might never see it again. But the Velnari had given him a second chance at life. Now it was his turn to give them a chance at freedom. The fleet launched in a staggered formation, each ship jumping to FTL in a brilliant flash of light. Millions of people on Earth watched the departure, many weeping, all hoping. News of the mission had spread across the planet. In cities and villages, people gathered to watch, to pray, to send their hopes into the stars. In the lead ship, Taesung settled into his command chair. Around him, his crew worked with quiet efficiency. These were professionals, trained and ready. But he could feel the tension, the fear, the uncertainty. All ships report ready for combat, his communications officer reported. Taesung took a deep breath. Set course for Velnari space. Maximum speed. The ship shuddered slightly as it accelerated. Through the viewport, stars stretched into lines of light. They were coming, Velinar, Taesung thought. Hold on just a little longer. Help is on the way. They saved one of us, so humanity returned for them. All the escape pod tumbled through the darkness of space, its hull scorched and breached in 3 places. Inside, Commander Taesung drifted between consciousness and death. His uniform was soaked with blood from the wound in his side. The last thing he remembered was the pirate ship's weapons tearing through the Perseverance, killing his entire crew in seconds. He had barely made it to the pod before the ship exploded. His oxygen meter blinked red. 2 hours of air left, maybe less. Not that it mattered. He was bleeding out anyway. Taesung closed his eyes and thought of Earth, of his sister's laugh, of the cherry blossoms in Seoul that he would never see again. This was a bad way to die, alone in the cold darkness between stars. Then everything went black. When Taesung woke up, he was confused. Dead people don't wake up. He tried to move, but his body wouldn't respond. Soft lights glowed above him, not harsh and white like human medical bays, but gentle and blue-green. The air smelled like rain and something sweet he couldn't identify. A face appeared above him. Taesung's first thought was that he was looking at a child, but then he realized this was no human. The being was barely 4 feet tall with skin that seemed to glow from within, patterns of light moving slowly across its surface like waves. Its eyes were large and dark, filled with something that looked like concern. "You are awake," the being said, its voice soft and musical. "Please do not try to move. Your injuries were severe. We have done what we can, but you need rest." Taesung tried to speak but only managed a weak sound. The being placed a 3-fingered hand on his forehead. The touch was cool and immediately soothing. "I am Velinar," the being said. "You are safe here. We found your pod drifting near our colony. You were very close to death." Over the next few days, Taesung learned more about his rescuers. They called themselves the Velnari, a species known throughout the galaxy as healers and scholars. Their ship was small, a medical vessel that traveled between their scattered colonies providing care. They had no weapons, no military, no way to defend themselves. They relied on the goodwill of other species and the protection of the Galactic Council. Velinar was the chief healer, old by Velnari standards, with wisdom that showed in every word. There was also Prin, a young navigator who had actually spotted Taesung's pod on their sensors. Prin visited often, asking endless questions about Earth and humanity with the curiosity of youth. "We almost didn't stop," Prin admitted one day, his bioluminescence flickering with embarrassment. "The area where we found you is dangerous. Pirates operate there." But Velinar insisted that all life is sacred. Taesung's recovery was slow. The Velnari had saved his life with their advanced medical knowledge, but his body still needed time to heal. 3 months passed. During that time, he lived among them, learning their ways, their language, their culture. The Velnari were gentle in every sense. They had no concept of violence, no weapons, no armies. Their entire civilization was built on compassion and knowledge. They grew their food, they healed the sick, they studied the stars. War was something they could not understand. But Taesung also learned something darker. The Velnari were targets. Their bioluminescent skin made them valuable to certain species who kept them as slaves, as living decorations. The Galactic Council did nothing to protect them, because the Velnari had no military power, no resources that anyone wanted, nothing to offer except their kindness. "It has always been this way," Velinar told him one evening as they sat in the observation deck, watching stars drift past. "We are weak, so we are prey, but we choose to remain as we are. Violence would change us into something we do not wish to be. Even if it means your people suffer?" Taesung asked. Velinar's patterns glowed softly. "We believe that compassion is strength, not weakness. Perhaps we are wrong, but it is who we are." Taesung felt something twist in his chest. These beings had used precious resources to save him, a stranger from a species they barely knew. They had spent months caring for him, feeding him, healing him, and they asked nothing in return. When the day came for Taesung to leave, the Velnari gave him supplies and a small shuttle to reach the nearest human outpost. The entire medical crew gathered to say goodbye. Prin gave him a small crystal that glowed with soft light, a traditional Velnari gift. Velinar walked him to the shuttle bay. "You owe us nothing," the old healer said. "We saved you because it was right, not because we expected payment." Taesung looked at the gentle being who had pulled him back from death. "I will never forget what you did for me," he said. "If your people ever need help, any help at all, you tell Earth. You tell them Commander Taesung sent you. We will come." Velinar's bioluminescence pulsed with something that might have been amusement or sadness. "You are kind to say so, but I suspect your people have more important concerns than a small species like us." "You're wrong," Taesung said. "Humanity remembers our debts. All of them." As his shuttle pulled away from the Velnari ship, Taesung watched it grow smaller in the viewport. Such a tiny vessel, carrying such good souls through a dangerous galaxy. He made himself a promise right there. Somehow, someday, he would repay what they had done for him. He just didn't know that someday would come much sooner than he thought, and in a way that would change everything. The journey back to human space took 2 weeks. Taesung had plenty of time to think, to process everything that had happened. His crew was dead. His ship was destroyed. But he was alive because a species of peaceful healers had risked their own safety to save him. When he finally reached the human outpost at Beta Station, He was debriefed by intelligence officers who wanted to know everything about the pirate attack. He told them the facts, but he also told them about the Velnari, about their kindness, about their vulnerability. Interesting species, one officer said, making notes, but not strategically important. The council classifies them as a minor civilization. No resources, no military capability, no political influence. Tae-sung felt anger rise in his chest. They saved my life. The officer looked up, surprised by his tone. Yes, and that's admirable. But Earth has to focus on our own security first. We're still new to the galactic community. We can't afford to get involved in every problem out there. Tae-sung said nothing more, but he thought about Velinar's words. Compassion is strength, not weakness. Maybe Earth needed to learn that lesson. He returned to active duty, received commendations for surviving the attack, and was given a new command. Life went on, but Tae-sung never forgot the Velnari. He kept the glowing crystal Prin had given him on his desk, and every day he checked the intelligence reports from their region of space. He was watching, waiting, because he had made a promise, and Tae-sung always kept his promises. They saved one of us, so humanity returned for them. All 6 months had passed since Tae-sung returned to Earth. He commanded a patrol ship now, nothing fancy, just border security duty. It was quiet work, the kind that let his mind wander, and his mind wandered often to the Velnari, to Velinar's gentle words, to Prin's curious questions. He checked the reports from their sector every morning. Usually there was nothing, just routine trading reports, diplomatic updates, the normal flow of galactic life. But one morning, everything changed. Tae-sung was drinking coffee in his quarters when the alert came through his personal terminal. His security clearance gave him access to intelligence reports from across known space. What he saw made the coffee cup slip from his hand. Kravik's Dominion forces have entered Velnari space. Multiple colonies report hostile contact. Galactic Council monitoring situation. Tae-sung's heart hammered in his chest. The Kraviks were not raiders or pirates. They were an empire, militaristic and brutal, with fleets that could glass planets. What would they want with the Velnari? He pulled up more reports, his fingers shaking as he typed. The picture that emerged was worse than he feared. The Kraviks weren't invading for resources or territory. They were taking the Velnari themselves, rounding them up by the thousands, loading them onto slave ships. The bioluminescent beings who healed the sick and studied the stars were being sold as living decorations to the highest bidder. Tae-sung immediately sent a message to Earth Command. Then he requested emergency leave and took the fastest transport to Geneva, where Earth's military headquarters sat in the shadow of the old United Nations building. Admiral Ji-won received him in her office overlooking Lake Geneva. She was a legend in the human fleet, a woman who had commanded ships in the First Contact Wars, who had negotiated Earth's entry into the Galactic Council. Her hair was gray now, but her eyes were still sharp. Commander Tae-sung, she said, gesturing to a chair. I read your report about the Velnari situation. I'm sorry. I know they saved your life. Admiral, we have to do something, Tae-sung said, not bothering with formalities. The Kraviks are enslaving them. The entire species could be wiped out or scattered across the galaxy in a matter of months. Ji-won sighed and pulled up a holographic display. It showed Velnari space now marked with red Kravik's military symbols. I've been following the situation. The Council has filed the standard protest, but they won't intervene. The Kraviks claim this is a territorial dispute, and technically the Velnari colonies are in contested space. That's bullshit and everyone knows it, Tae-sung said, his voice rising. The Council is just afraid of the Kraviks. Yes, Ji-won said simply. They are. The Kraviks have one of the largest fleets in the galaxy. Most Council species won't risk confronting them, especially not over a minor species with no political power. Tae-sung leaned forward. And Earth? What's our position? Ji-won was quiet for a moment, looking out at the lake. Officially, Earth is neutral. We're still new to galactic politics. We don't have the military strength to challenge a major power like the Kraviks, and we need the Council's support for our own security. So we do nothing, Tae-sung said bitterly. I didn't say that, Ji-won replied. I said our official position is neutral. But you've put me in a difficult position, Commander. You made me care about these people. She pulled up another display, this one showing casualty estimates, projected timelines, horrific images of Velnari being loaded into cargo holds like animals. 3 Velnari colonies have already fallen. 2 more are under siege. The Kraviks are efficient. Within 2 weeks, they'll have processed most of the Velnari population. Processed, that's the word they use. Taesung felt sick. Velinar's colony? On the list for processing in 12 days. The door to Jiwon's office opened and a man in diplomatic robes entered. Daehyun, Earth's senior ambassador to the Galactic Council. He looked annoyed. Admiral, I heard Commander Taesung was here, Daehyun said. I hope you're not considering what I think you're considering. I'm considering many things, Jiwon said coolly. Daehyun turned to Taesung. Commander, I understand you have personal feelings about the Velnari. What they did for you was noble. But Earth cannot afford to antagonize the Kravik's dominion over a species that offers us nothing strategic. We're still building our position in the Council. One wrong move could isolate us. They saved my life, Taesung said quietly. When they had every reason to save their resources for themselves, they saved me. They asked for nothing in return. That's very touching, Daehyun said, his voice dripping with condescension. But diplomacy isn't about feelings. It's about interests. The Velnari have nothing we need. They have honor, Taesung shot back. They have compassion. Maybe those are things we need. Daehyun laughed. Honor, compassion? Commander, you've been in space too long. Those are luxuries that weak species indulge in before stronger species conquer them. That's how the galaxy works. Taesung stood up, fists clenched. Then maybe it's time someone changed how the galaxy works. Enough, Jiwon said sharply. She stood as well, her presence commanding instant silence. Ambassador Daehyun, thank you for your input. You may go. Admiral, I must protest. You've protested. Now go. After Daehyun left, muttering about military overreach, Jiwon poured 2 glasses of whiskey from a bottle on her desk. She handed one to Taesung. My grandfather was a soldier, she said, looking at the amber liquid. He used to tell me that the measure of a person isn't what they do when it's easy. It's what they do when it's hard. When doing the right thing costs them everything. What are you saying? Taesung asked. Jiwon downed her whiskey in one gulp. I'm saying that I'm going to call a meeting of Earth Security Council. And I'm going to recommend that we intervene in Velnari space, consequences be damned. Taesung felt hope rise in his chest, but Jiwon held up a hand. Don't celebrate yet. The Council might reject my recommendation. Even if they approve, we're talking about risking a significant portion of Earth's fleet for a species we barely know. It's madness from a strategic perspective. But it's right, Taesung said. Yes, Jiwon said quietly. It's right. And maybe that's enough. The meeting was held 2 days later in a secure bunker beneath Geneva. Earth's Security Council consisted of representatives from every major nation, military commanders, and key diplomats. The debate was fierce. Many argued against intervention. Earth was still recovering from the contact wars, still building its place in the galactic order. A confrontation with the Kraviks could be disastrous. Other species would see Earth as reckless, aggressive, a threat to stability. But then something unexpected happened. Taesung's report about the Velnari, the one he'd filed months ago, was leaked to the public. Within hours, it went viral across Earth's networks. People read about the gentle healers who had saved a human life asking nothing in return. They saw the images of Velnari being enslaved. They heard Velinar's words, all life is sacred. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Protests erupted in major cities demanding action. Social media flooded with messages of support for the Velnari. Famous figures, artists, scientists all called on Earth's government to do something. The pressure became impossible to ignore. In the council chamber, Admiral Jiwon stood before the representatives. Earth has a choice, she said, her voice carrying through the room. We can choose safety, security, political expediency, or we can choose to be the species that keeps its promises, that stands up for those who can't stand up for themselves. She paused, letting her words sink in. The Velnari saved one of ours. They asked nothing in return. If we abandon them now, what does that say about humanity? What message does that send to the galaxy? The vote was close, but it passed. Earth would intervene. As Taesung left the bunker, his communication device buzzed with a priority message. It was from Admiral Jiwon. Report to Fleet Command. You're leading the assault force. 2 weeks to prepare. Make them count. Taesung looked up at the stars beginning to appear in the evening sky. Somewhere out there, Velinar and the other Velnari were facing darkness and despair. But help was coming. Humanity was coming, and they would bring fury with them.